Hello everyone, my name is Bibin Joko Omodasala Omolara Ogochukwazubogo. I'm a fifth year medical student here at Nnamdi Azikiwe University. I read a lot and I write, and I have platforms where I do that on WordPress and on Substack. And I think that Chimamanda Adichie should be president of the entire world.
Standard level medical student. I'm the founder of Health Hubs, Feminist Cafe, amongst other things that I do and I'll still venture into.
I'm a fifth-year medical student at Nnamdi Azikiwe University Teaching Hospital, Anambra State. I'm a creator. I'm also the co-founder of Flowchart, a menstrual health non-profit that uses data to drive impact.
The first story that has inspired change in me is one I experienced in my first part of my pediatrics posting. Ideally, we were supposed to interact with patients and collect 10 patients for the end of the posting, and I was always very nervous and concerned because we have heard stories of patients being unresponsive or being angry or not being kind or even outrightly lying to you. So it was a new week. I had approached this woman and asked her if I could ask her some questions, and she agreed, and we started to talk. First off, I recalled that clerking as one of the best I had done in medical school, at least at that time, because I was able to speak in English from beginning to end. If you're here, you know what that means, because sometimes it's hard to express yourself in a language that they understand. So my patient's mom was very educated and she could answer my questions very well. I didn't have to explain too much or try to find the version of that word or that thing and that language. So that was, first of all, very good. And then in the course of the interaction, asking her questions about herself, I asked what her religion was. And usually when we ask patients what religion they practice, they always get angry and they're like, are you a pagan? Are you an idol worshiper? All those kind of things. Of course, we are all Christians. So because of that, usually what we do is to ask, what church do you attend? So with that, we've already covered what their religion is, and then we're just going to ask the church. So I did that. I was like, Mom, what church do you attend? And she was like, I'm not a Christian. I was like, okay. So yeah, maybe you don't go to church. Not like you're not a Christian or something. And then she goes on to say that she practices African traditional religion. That really took me aback, because that was the first time somebody was telling me directly that they practice African traditional religion. So I answered of course it's so normal. I've heard it all my life. I just continued clicking, and then we got to the end. But that particular incident taught me that most times we generalize, and sometimes we get away with it and it doesn't affect anything. But I believe that I now know that if things are meant to be asked a certain way, or you have to find out some things, then go ahead and find out. Don't assume. Of course, it's not limited to clerking or taking history from patients. This extends to every other part of our lives. Do not generalize, do not just assume, do not just come into conclusions without actually asking. You can ask and you end up getting the same response, but at least you have asked and you know that you're saying something correct. That's the first part of this story. And the second part of this story was that because I was so happy, I told everybody that cared to listen that I had collected the first patient ever I could collect in English from beginning to the end. I told everybody, go ask all my friends, they know the story, because I told them I was so happy to have done this. And the following day when I went to the clinic again, when I went to the ward again, I went to look for this woman just to ask her how she was doing and how her child was doing. And the child saw me and the child hugged me, and I was happy too. I just added to my already very full happiness. And then ever since then, once I collect a patient, especially in the wards or interact with them, I go to check up on them. I saw that it was something that I could do, did not cost me anything, and the patients were always happy for you to see them as human beings, not just patients, not just people to collect, not just people to examine. So each time I collect a patient in the ward, for the most part, I always go back after a couple of days or the next day just to find out how they're doing and how they're recovering, and it makes them very happy, because this is another story entirely, but it makes them happy because sometimes even the doctors, other health workers just treat them as just a statistic, just somebody in the hospital that we need to attend to and let them just go and leave us alone. So yeah, it makes them happy. So that's the end of my story.
So for me, the patient story that inspired change in me happened during our first medicine posting. We were having ward round on that day, and so the senior registrar ward round, and we met this patient who had traveled from a very, very far village to Imeru. And immediately I saw the patient, I was concerned about her appearance, and our son's appearance as well. The son looked tattered, looked like somebody that has not had his bath for like 2-3 days, while the woman also looked very sick. Our SR took the history, did examination. She came with a diabetic foot ulcer, and our SR wrote some investigations for them to do as well. But while our SR was writing the whole of the investigations, I was a little bit bothered, like, these people in here, can they afford these investigations for real? That was my concern that day. And immediately I got home for the first time after the ward round, I just felt like their story was just on my mind. I couldn't let go. So the first thing I just did when I got home was just to pray for them. Like, I didn't really have a particular prayer point. As M1 student, I was feeling like amputation was so horrible for her. But then at the same time, I thought that was the best decision they could make. So my prayer point was just like, God, take charge, God, intervene, have mercy, provide for them. That was my major prayer point for her and her son as well. The following day we got there, just as I have assumed, they've not done any of the investigations, none of them. So our SR had to invite social workers for them. I was happy that, there is a part of social workers coming in patient management. And that was it. About 2 weeks later on, I came back to just like follow up. And I saw her watching a movie on her phone. She looked more excited. Her appearance was welcoming. So I was kind of very happy. So I asked her how far about their investigations and treatment. And she was like, one of the nurses' husbands sent some money to them and they've been able to do the investigations. I was very happy. The following day happened to be a Sunday service, and in my church, I was the one that handled our Sunday school session. So while I was teaching, I just kind of brought in my story about the woman, and that ended it. After service on that day, one of my church members just came to me. It was during Easter period, and she was like, one philanthropist reached out to her. The person wants to come to the teaching hospital for some charity works. I was just like, please come and use my patient, I was just M1 student then, and I took ownership of that patient. But what actually stood out for me in her story that inspired a change in me was the fact that I could pray and God answered my prayer, because the philanthropist came and actually cleared some of the abuse as well, and eventually she amputated her legs and she left the hospital. So I knew the power of prayer through this woman. Even if I cannot afford to give a patient 1 million naira or some money, I can actually pray for that patient. So I feel that's it for me.
So I'll be describing a snapshot into one of the patient stories that has inspired change in me. I think this one starts in the afternoon, so it's the second pediatric posting, and it was after school hours. It was probably like 3 p.m, but it was late relative to what we would normally stay for or stay until. So normally I was hurrying to leave until I stopped. Now thinking back, I can't remember exactly why I stopped, but I remember that I stopped to converse with one of the patient's caregivers, his mom. He was a young boy, probably a little over the age of one year, and his mom was quite friendly. I think the disposition was quite friendly. I think that was probably why I stopped. But I just asked her how she was doing, and I asked about what brought them to the hospital. And 10 seconds into the conversation, I knew that I wanted to stay back and converse with this patient. And that really happened. Wanting to just stay back and just talk. But she was very friendly. She was also, I can't quite describe it, but it was a really interesting conversation. It was one that she was very involved in, and it was exciting to also see that she was well educated. so she could to an extent understand what I was saying. She could to a very large extent understand all I was saying. I have not seen a patient or a patient caregiver throughout so much medical jargon. But it was interesting, and it was also challenging. I knew that I could not spill nonsense in front of this woman, and I think that was also really, really interesting. But there were a couple of things that struck me. Well, first, it was the fact that she was really involved in the patient's care. She wanted to know every single thing that was going on for her child. But I'll describe it the way the conversation went. So like I said, I asked her what brought them into the hospital, and she described that it was just a case of diarrhea and vomiting of a few days. And I think one of the usual questions we'd ask is if she gave any oral hydration solutions to kind of combat the dehydration that was going on. And she confidently said, of course, that why would she not? She sounded like a very educated young woman. I almost thought that she was a doctor. I found that she had a BSc, a Bachelor of Science in a social science course. So this patient story inspired me a lot because I don't get to see a lot of patients very involved and very knowledgeable. I think it was also the level of knowledge that also changed it, because some people are involved but not necessarily knowledgeable, so they can only get so involved. But that was also, it was interesting, inspiring, and it was challenging to a very large extent. It was very challenging. It also taught me a lot about patient interaction. It made me understand that I could actually do this. The interaction was beautiful. We created this beautiful rapport, and we proceeded to talk about so many other things. And I think this is the last point that really, really struck me. We started to talk about the breastfeeding practices. I asked along the line of taking a history and just conversing with her. I asked about if the child was exclusively breastfed, meaning if she fed the child on breast milk for the first 6 months of life, only breast milk, and she said no. And this was a bit of a shocker because I don't know, I'm trying to paint the patient I met. She was very well educated. She sounded like the perfect prototype patient, and I'm like, why? Why didn't you? Because I really wanted to understand her reasoning. So she said she didn't really see the need, that she knows people talk about it, but she never really saw the need. Now this was a very rational woman who thought like her decisions through. So it did make sort of sense that because she didn't understand why, she's very hygienic with preparing the baby formula, so she doesn't understand why she should be on exclusive breastfeeding. So I explained to her about I tied it with like the ailment they came in with, the diarrhea and the vomiting. I explained to her how the breast milk helps protect the gut barrier. I explained to her about the antibodies transferred from the mother to the child. Particularly, I also talked about the bulk of food when it comes with. We ventured into discussing about pap, which is like a staple for babies down here in the East, and I talked about the bulk and how the gut of the baby cannot handle that bulk of food, and she was surprised. We both inferred, that this would kind of lead to cases like intussusception, where like the gut of the child telescopes into itself, and we both kind of like reached that conclusion together. It was literally like I guided her to that conclusion, and she was like, wow. And I affirmed her, and she was really excited because she said one thing that I think I will always remember, that nobody has ever explained it like this. And he also pointed out the huge gaping hole in patient awareness. I feel like we're doing a lot, maybe because I'm in the space of medical health education, but somehow it made me realize that we're actually not doing enough. So this interaction inspired a lot of questions and a lot of thinking. But every good thing starts with asking the right questions.